The story begins with us seeing a man lying on a bed fully clothed. He is our main character, Chris, waking up in confusion. One of the first things he sees is that his arm is bloody, so he runs to the washroom to wash it off. Interestingly, he finds a sticky note on the mirror, instructing him not to stay there too long. The way Chris is looking around, we can reasonably guess he has never been in this house. Therefore, it is a huge mystery how he ended up in the place. Then he exits the washroom and places his ear against another door before opening it. He tries to do it carefully, but the door messes with him by stubbornly creaking. After opening it, Chris starts descending the stairs. We notice he is currently the only person in this house. Downstairs, he finds a grand piano and a chessboard. Yet, more importantly, he finds a second sticky note on the front door. It tells him not to go outside. Moving along, Chris enters another room with many lit candles. There is a landline on the wall, and he puts its receiver to his ear. Despite there being a dial tone, he puts it back without calling anyone. As he keeps investigating the house inside the kitchen, he locates a third note. It advises him not to go downstairs. At this point, Chris must be drowning in his confusion. Soon he observes a safe with a lock on. He slowly reaches for it, and music unexpectedly starts to play, giving him a good scare. Thus, he ascends the stairs because that's where the source of the sound is. Opening a door, he sees what looks like a girl's room. The radio is there, playing the song that startled him. When he turns it off, a sliding closet door slides open by itself. Chris takes a small peek inside prior to closing it. A fourth note exists in this room, telling him to find a key. Unlike the other notes, this one is ripped for some reason. The perplexing situation causes him to sit on the bed, not knowing what to do. He picks up a doll and squeezes her to hear an affectionate statement. Afterward, Chris heads into another room with a mirror possessing a fifth note. As he walks toward it, he steps on a shard of glass. Although no harm was done, he picks it up to inspect it, but it doesn't seem to provide him with any clue. Looking at the note on the mirror, he reads that it asks him who this is. How appropriate to ask such a question while being posted to a mirror. Chris is forced to look at himself and perhaps wonder who he is. The next scene shows him downstairs, where he finds a pack of sticky notes. He decides to write the same message twice as the one on the front door. As he does that, the man realizes the words on the notes were written by him, because it's his handwriting. It prompts him to stare at the "Don't go downstairs" note. He must be wondering what made him write that. Plus, it should make him more likely to obey the messages, for he can surely be a person he can trust. Later, Chris enters a new room that has a curious metal box on the floor. It possesses no specific features except being a smooth box. Drawing near, he attempts to open it, but the box is sealed shut. Since he can't open it, he taps on the box to learn whatever he can. His tap seems to create a strange echo. Then he comes to the front door, wanting to open it. However, the message he wrote at an earlier time prevents him from taking this action. In another room, Chris finds a Bible in a drawer. Today isn't the day to read it though. The man walks into the washroom again. He looks at the note on the mirror, which tells him not to stay there for too long. Instead of listening to it, Chris sits on the floor and finds water there. It makes him look at the wall, where he observes water dripping. While he looks at it, we see the bathtub curtain move behind him, and a hand rise up eerily. Hearing the movement, Chris becomes scared and turns around to witness it. The hand scares him even more, so he rushes out of the washroom. Soon he musters the courage to venture back into the washroom. He takes his time before quickly moving the curtain to the side. Interestingly, nothing is in the bathtub now. Chris removes the sticky note from the mirror to place it on the door. Following this, he wants to go outside again. This time, he decides to open the front door because it is simply too scary to stay inside. Outside happens to be a very strange place. Chris walks through an area darker than a usual night while holding on to something. In a few seconds, he comes across a slightly open door and opens it more to go inside. Scarily, the place he enters looks exactly like the place he left. At this point, we should consider there might be a supernatural element at play here. Chris approaches the painting on the wall, seeing it has a bloody handprint on it. Then he decides to flip the painting around, revealing a mirror with another note on it. This one advises him to not let something see him. Chris takes the note and worryingly looks upstairs. Subsequently, the man enters the room with the radio, where at last we hear him speak for the first time. He has to vocalize to himself by asking what is happening. Seeing the sliding closet door being slightly open, he closes it. Afterward, he finds a small box, which contains another note. It asks if he remembers something and states it is important. The box also contains a blue bracelet and a child's drawing of a family at a barbecue. Under the drawing, there are words written that one of the people does not belong. Chris is given a strong clue that it is likely the man due to him being crossed out many times. We wonder if the man is him. He sits there with the bracelet in his hand for a few seconds before he goes back to the kitchen. There he places the bracelet and the unsettling drawing on the island. He finds water there too, like he did on the washroom floor. Looking at the faucet, Chris notices it is dripping, so he closes it completely. Soon the man starts opening drawers in search of something to help with this confusing situation. What he ends up finding is a flashlight. Opening the refrigerator, he becomes startled upon seeing a mask with horns. He takes it out and sets it on the island with the rest of his collected items. Then he makes his way to the safe to investigate the lock. This time, no sudden music turns on to scare him. On the bottom of it, there is a 4-digit combination that must be entered to unlock it. Trying to skip this hard step, Chris pulls at the lock to rip it off. Unfortunately, he does not possess the strength of a gorilla. We know something important is inside the safe because it's positioned in the middle of the room, has a lock on it, and is surrounded by lit candles. Later, the man looks at the chessboard to observe that all the black pawns have advanced 2 steps. The meaning of this is highly uncertain, but one guess is that it means the darkness is winning since the black pieces could symbolize evil. Moving along, Chris curiously looks at the door with a note on it that instructs him not to go downstairs. He doesn't know what else to do, therefore he opens it. He has to collect himself some more prior to venturing inside the dark place. Once Chris does, he descends with his flashlight shining. He's lucky he found it, or else he would be unable to continue his investigation. Soon he comes across a brick wall with 3 notes on it. The first one tells him to run, the second to trap something, and the third to hide. Interestingly, all of the notes end with a question mark for some reason. Then he finds a 4th note on the floor with blood on it. This one asks if he should fight. As he is looking at it, a sudden thud from above frightens him. This is followed by him hearing something being rolled up there. More sudden loud noises happen to scare him further. When they stop, he keeps walking. But the battery in his flashlight loses its life. Consequently, a terrified Chris returns to the kitchen. There he collects a long knife and stealthily moves into the living room, where he encounters one of his most unnerving occurrences. On the table, many cutleries are laid out to form the message, "I am here." If that wasn't enough, a ring from the kitchen landline gets him to turn around in fear. After he heads toward it, the man picks up the receiver and hears ominous sounds emanating from the device. This causes him to put it back fearfully. Following this, we see the chessboard has the black pawns back 1 step. Yet Chris does not see this as he goes upstairs. Inside the girl's room again, he fearfully draws near the sliding closet door. Like with the locked safe earlier, the radio turns on to abruptly shift his focus away from what he is doing. Since it is emitting static, Chris starts tuning it. However, it seems like it was a bad idea because he tunes it to hear a fearsome sound. After he turns the radio off, he opens the closet door and finds a stuffed tiger in there. It has a note on it, telling Chris to look up. So he looks up in the closet to find a box. Sitting on the bed with it, he finds a photo inside of someone with a scratched out face. The second item in the box is a drill absent of a drill bit. The third item is a reel for a projector, something that happens to exist in the living room. Thus, Chris directs himself there to use the reel he found. On the chessboard behind him, we should notice the black pawns are 2 steps ahead again. Their constant shifting positions are nothing short of baffling. While playing, the projector displays what looks like Chris with his wife and daughter engaged in a barbecue. For some reason, he is acting aggressively towards his wife. He even seems to strike her or come close to it with one of the utensils. Seeing this disturbing happening, Chris turns off the projector instantly. Now the room has become dark, and he hears scary snarls. It prompts the man to run into the girl's room, where he hides from whatever is out there. He sees that the doll he looked at previously is lying in bed. Pressing it, Chris hears the doll say this isn't him. That is an unexpected message for him, driving Chris to press the doll a few more times. But all of them result in the usual doll responses. Then he picks up a jigsaw puzzle box with a note on it. After he empties the pieces on the floor, he sees the note telling him to keep the door shut. Time passes, and Chris is engaged in solving the puzzle that is nothing except blackness. As he does it, someone is trying to open the door. Thankfully, the door is locked, yet whoever is behind it is persistent. Once Chris nearly finishes the puzzle, the door gets unlocked, so he leaps toward it to keep it closed. We see he just has 3 more pieces left to complete the puzzle. Chris manages to put one in, while struggling to keep the door closed. The penultimate jigsaw is even harder to put in its place. At this point, the door is exceedingly hard to keep shut, and the being behind it pushes Chris away. The man falls on the nearly completed puzzle with the last piece in his hand. Looking at it, he sees he put it into the puzzle the moment his hand landed on it. The door is open, but there is nothing there, which brings Chris a ton of relief. He slowly goes downstairs, where he hears water running from the washer. Entering this different washroom, he approaches the curtain with caution, yet moves it to the side with speed. Chris discovers the faucet is running, and the bathtub is full of water. After he turns it off, he sees a drill bit in the bathtub. We know this is exactly what he needs to use the drill he found in the box. Following this, we see the house is now dark, and Chris has to feel his way around the kitchen. Lucky for him, the lights soon return. His next step is him walking into the room with the metal box. He uses the drill with its bit to unscrew the 4 screws holding the lid in place. Lifting the lid, the man sees that the inside of the box is full of hay or straw. A Father's Day card is the first item he finds under all that farm material. The inside of the card has many positive statements written on it that are perhaps directed at Chris. It also plays a sentimental song. Everything about the card brings him to tears. Moving along, he finds another flashlight as his second gift. His final gift is a pouch containing a few strange figures. Having collected these new items, Chris tries to leave the room. The problem with such a decision is that the door is locked. From under the box, he notices liquid starting to spread toward him. This liquid terrifies him for some reason, and he panics to get out of there. So he rips the Father's Day card in search of a key, but nothing is in there. Then he unscrews the part of the flashlight where the battery is, and a key falls out. That is his ticket out of there. Chris uses it to unlock the door before the odd liquid reaches him. In the kitchen, he places his new items on the island where all his collected items reside. Looking at the sticky note with the word "fight" written on it, he places the knife near it. The confused man does not know what to do. Soon he takes the red figure out from the pouch and begins to ascend the stairs. On one of the steps, he witnesses something creepy. The doll he pressed is sitting on it with her head twisted backward. Whatever this means, Chris is forced to ignore it. Afterward, he occupies a room with many tabletop games. He places his red figure near them. Opening the one titled The Farming Game, Chris sees it's full of nothing except seeds. He moves his hand in the seeds to find something and seems to cut himself. The reason is that there was a long mirror shard hidden amid the seeds. He looks at his baffled reflection in it. Subsequently, Chris returns to the room with the mirror. As he raises his arm, he becomes scared to see that his reflection isn't doing the same. The mirror Chris starts coming at him, prompting the real Chris to strike the mirror with his flashlight to shatter it. Having done this, 2 messages are now revealed, carved into the wooden part of the mirror. The messages are references to verses in the Bible. Of course, with this information, the next step for Chris to take is to be in the room with the Bible. After taking the book out of the drawer, he starts looking for the verses that were referenced. Looking through it, he finds another note that informs him she is in the basement. We don't know if this note is mentioning his wife or daughter. Then Chris finds the first verse and reads it to himself. At this moment, we observe something or someone rising under the cover of the bed. When Chris sees the mysterious figure standing behind him, he rushes out of the room in fear. Walking backward, he trips on the doll. This is followed by him hanging several loud ornaments on the outside of a door. There must be a good reason for doing that. Going downstairs, Chris observes his wife and daughter in the mirror, yet not in the real world. He watches them with sadness prior to pressing the doll he's been holding. Another unusual statement exits her. As she asks where Daddy is, Chris is brought to tears again. We come to understand that whatever he has done, he regrets his bad choices. The moment he finishes crying, the landline rings. Answering it allows him to hear the voice of his daughter. His eyes widen due to hearing her, and he starts talking. Now a lady says his name, making Chris ask her for help. Since she starts yelling, he is forced to put the receiver back. The man becomes overcome with emotions to the point of falling to the floor. He loses himself there. Following this, Chris decides to watch the reel on the projector a second time, sitting through his bad behavior until it finishes. Then he stands near the basement door, getting ready to venture into the scariest of rooms. Before he does, he writes a message on his arm. It states that he should do it for his family. He takes out the blue bracelet to hold it, probably for good luck. Entering the basement with his flashlight, he notices there is water on the floor. Another thing he notices is a person lying under a blanket ahead in the darkness. Again, Chris has to hold the bracelet for support. As he keeps walking, he soon sees a woman sitting inside a bathtub full of water and sobbing bitterly. There is a page from the Bible near her. He makes his way toward the woman, who is very likely his wife, and sees the person under the blanket is now standing. Despite being scared, the man continues to walk to her. The figure is also drawing nearer. Once Chris collects the Bible page, the figure is right there with him. He stares at the covered being for some time until he starts to slowly move. Shortly after his back hits the wall, the room becomes dark. causing Chris to flee from the basement. Fortunately, he is not empty-handed, for he has the Bible page with him. It contains the second verse he needed to read, which was not in the Bible he found earlier. This verse speaks of children belonging to God. Plus, the one who resides within oneself is greater than the one who is in the world. Then Chris realizes that the numbers preceding the Bible verses could be the combination of the lock on the safe. Thus he puts in the numbers, and to his pleasant surprise, they are correct. Inside the safe lies a key and a torn piece of paper. It is the missing part of the sticky note from the girl's room. As Chris ascends the stairs, we see the chessboard only has the 2 kings on it. The white king is lying, whereas the black one isn't. Perhaps this means evil has won. In the girl's room, Chris connects the missing piece of the sticky note to the main one, forming a complete message. It tells him to find the key to know the truth. With that done, he opens the drawer with a key from the safe. There is a box inside that he takes out and opens. There is a tiny headless ballerina in the box in addition to a note. It states this is his house and an unspecified it does not belong there. Also, God has not given him a spirit of fear. Soon he hears the ornaments he placed on the door, making their unique sound. Approaching the door, Chris sees it is open. Afterward, he descends to the living room, where he sees the same being lying on the table, covered like it was in the basement. With fear in his voice, the man tells the being it doesn't belong there. It jerks due to hearing those words. Repeating them, Chris gets the being to jerk even more. Then he puts the bracelet on his wrist and yells for the being to get out. It moves around involuntarily under the blanket until it suddenly stops. When Chris comes to it, a dark hand grabs him. The being holds the man down with a strong grip. But Chris looks at the message he wrote on his arm for inspiration. He tells himself that this is his house and slowly stands up, demanding that the evil being leave immediately. With those powerful words, the creature looks up to roar. It gets replaced with Chris in a similar position as he screams. In a few seconds, the troubled man falls into bed. Once he opens his eyes, he sees a priest holding a cross in Chris's direction. Another priest is there too, seeming nervous. The third person in the room is the man's crying wife. From the look of everything, we can safely guess that Chris has undergone an exorcism, and it was successful. The priest who holds the cross welcomes him back. Later, Chris reunites with his wife. We know what he went through, but we don't know what horrors she had to endure while she watched the exorcism take place. Needless to say, they are both crying. He gets on his knees to hug the poor woman. She hugs him back without either of them saying a word. Then they stand near a window to look at their daughter, who is outside. Chris walks over to her and sits beside the girl. At first, she looks at him with discomfort. Yet when he smiles, she smiles too. Whatever he has done, his daughter is quick to forgive him. As he walks while carrying her, we see that she is wearing the blue bracelet. Chris's wife watches them happily from the kitchen window. Lastly, our attention is brought to a dripping faucet, ending the movie on an eerie note.